One thing I love about superhero media becoming so mainstream is formerly forgotten characters now being thrust into the spotlight. And in my opinion, no character illustrates that better than Peacemaker. Now, being into superhero media my entire life, I consider myself pretty knowledgeable about most characters. But when it was announced John Cena would be playing Peacemaker in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, everyone's reaction, myself included, wasn't roaring applause, but rather, ooh. And then when it was announced immediately after that he was getting his own spin-off show on HBO Max, our next question was, why? But by golly, Gunn worked his magic yet again, because not only was his show a hit, but it's also getting a second season set to release in August of this year. But he's also made a resurgence in the comics, as well as appearing in more shows and video games, even being a guest character in Mortal Kombat 1. Talk about skyrocketing in popularity. Said popularity results in Peacemaker getting his own miniseries in 2023. Peacemaker Tries Hard, under DC's Black Label imprint. For those of you unaware, Black Label is essentially an imprint for comics aimed at mature audiences and aren't intended to be part of the main continuity. All without the same kind of editorial restriction you'd get in an in-continuity book. So you can show gore and drop the F-bomb as many times as you want, but don't you dare show a penis! So, with that preamble out of the way, let's get into it. Peacemaker Tries Hard is penned by Kyle Starks, who some of you may remember from my Wild Dog video as the guy who wrote that character's mini-arc in Batman the Brave and the Bold. With how funny, but also action-packed and surprisingly emotional that story got in not a whole lot of pages, I had quite high hopes getting into this. Our artist for this venture is Steve Pugh. Other than this, I think his most well-known work would be scattered issues on Hellblazer and Animal Man during the early to mid-90s. He was also the artist for Superman vs. Terminator and an Eisner-nominated Flintstones series, which is pretty cool as well. The best way I can describe his art style is that it leans heavily into caricature, realistic feces. Sorry. That was a typo in the script that I genuinely didn't catch until now. God, I hope the comic doesn't have realistic feces. Realistic faces and bodies with really exaggerated expressions, which is perfect for a comedic book like this, even if sometimes the art veers a little into the uncanny valley. First and foremost, as we're getting into this comic is very clearly emulating Peacemaker's world as depicted in the show, rather than any of his history from the comics. So if you're hoping for something closer to the more serious, jingoistic, proto-comedian version of Peacemaker, you're gonna be disappointed. But if you enjoyed John Cena's portrayal and just want a fun ride, then this is the comic for you. That said, despite taking heavy inspiration to the point where he's straight up drawn as Cena, this comic is not canon to the show, and is solely its own standalone product. So, what is the plot of Peacemaker Tries Hard? Well, Peacemaker's birthday is coming up and he's feeling pretty lonely. He's throwing a big party to celebrate and he has no friends to celebrate with. The Suicide Squad blew him off, random cops don't know who he is, the random citizens he saves just don't want anything to do with him. He's got nobody. Well, all that changes until he meets the cutest thing on four legs, a stray dog who looks like he's wearing a little suit, which he adopts and will henceforth be known as Bruce Wayne. So, this is great. He's finally got a companion who loves him unconditionally until tragedy strikes. Bruce Wayne is stolen by the Brain and his lover, Monsieur Mala. Yes, you heard me. These two are somehow one of, if not the most wholesome relationship in DC Comics. What of it? Brain is tired of being just a brain in a jar, so he wants Peacemaker to get DNA from Deathstroke to clone the perfect new body for him, in exchange for getting Bruce Wayne back. Only it turns out to be an elaborate ruse, so they take the DNA and run without giving the dog back. So it's time for Peacemaker to go full John Wick, but dumber. He knows he can't do this alone, so he starts putting a crew together. He calls Amanda Waller for help from the Suicide Squad, leading to hands down the funniest gag in an already very funny comic. All Waller hears from the phone is Bruce Wayne has been kidnapped, and she's ready to go to war. Only to realize he's talking about a dog. Peacemaker is so lucky to still have his head after that. So, no squad, but his parole officer Richard is ready to throw down with some supervillains, which isn't reassuring whatsoever until he reveals he used to be a superhero named the Red Bee back in World War II. He doesn't have any cool powers like flight or some kind of stingers or maybe shooting bees out of his hands like a Bioshock protagonist. He's just a dude with trained bees. Well, a trained bee he named Michael. This is not the ideal team to get a dog back from a supervillain who may or may not have a new body clone from the world's deadliest pedophile and his hyper-intelligent gorilla companion, but it's better than nothing. Along the way, they have to contend with the likes of Snowflame, the cocaine-powered supervillain, yes, you heard that right, and the Demolition Team, a team of villainous construction workers. The latter is easily a highlight because they're not just evil construction workers, they're unionized evil construction workers, leading to the second funniest gag in this incredibly funny comic. Bad time and place, but you know what? Good on Hardhat for recognizing and standing up for his workers' rights. And the team has their priorities in line. When Peacemaker kills one of their own in a fight, they're in despair over their 63-day streak of not having any workplace incidents ruined by some would-be superhero. And you know they're not going to stand for that. They may be crazy enough to take on the guy who'd kill as many men, women, and children as it takes for peace, but OSHA? No, thank you. The two of them go through several grueling trials and tribulations, including but not limited to the aforementioned Snowflame, which is actually foreshadowed earlier via this autographed portrait of him, an army of Deathstroke babies, and worst of all, a teenage Deathstroke. Oh god, someone make sure the original doesn't go anywhere near this one. But anyway, I really like how Peacemaker deals with teen Deathstroke here. So, for context, it's a recurring theme through the book just how much his dad screwed him up by training him to kill people since birth. Not Parent of the Year material by any means. So, he sees something of himself in teen Deathstroke since Brain essentially did the exact same thing with him, and imparts some shockingly deep wisdom I didn't think this version of Christopher Smith was capable of. He tells TDS that any idiot is capable of bringing a child into the world, but it takes a real man to listen to their child and support what they want to do with their own lives, rather than dictate the kid's entire life for them. And you know what? It actually works. Teen Slade just wants to play video games and dance, and Peacemaker, like a proper father figure, is fully supportive of his passions and tells him to go do what he loves. And he does. Good thing, too, because they already had a hard enough time with the babies. I don't think they'd be able to handle a near fully grown Deathstroke. You know, this has me thinking. I think Brain's going about this all wrong. Instead of growing himself a new body to take over the world, why not just clone a ton of superheroes and supervillains and put them all in a high school together? Okay, that has nothing to do with the actual comic. I just finished the newest season of Clone High a few days ago, and I'm still bummed that it ended on a cliffhanger again. If I had a nickel for every time the season ended on a cliffhanger, only to be cancelled with dwindling chances of a continuation, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but come on! Anyway, not the point. We get our epic showdown with Mala and Brain and his newly cloned Deathstroke body, christening himself the War Maker. Oh, hey, like the counter to Peacemaker. I just noticed that while writing. Clever. Brain's having the time of his life having a new body for the first time in decades, enjoying a good physical fight, scheming world domination, all while he and Mala give each other what the
frag
is a tandem okay, you know what? I don't want to know. You'd think a super genius in Deathstroke's body would be a tough battle for relative C-listers like Peacemaker and the Red Bee, but
actually, it's gonna be super easy, barely an inconvenience.
As the latter's Bee, Michael, makes the ultimate sacrifice as he stings Warmaker in his one good eye, and RB slices his head open and the brain just falls out, where Mala then tosses it into the body of Chemo, which was also foreshadowed earlier. Since the Suicide Squad was sent on a mission to find out who stole him from storage in Star Labs. Hey Waller, solved that one for you real easily. Some of you may remember Chemo from my Under the Red Hood video where he's the supervillain dropped on Bloodhaven as a living nuke, which is to say Brain inhabiting that body is substantially more of a problem than a Deathstroke body. But not all hope is lost. It turns out that Brain invented all sorts of war machines over the years, like the war wheel that killed all Richard's war buddies. So as one last big act of heroism, he sacrifices himself by running the war wheel into Chemo Brain, killing them both and saving the world. But today's tale ends on a positive note. It's time for Peacemaker's birthday, and contrary to his insecurities, he doesn't have to spend it alone. As thanks for saving the world from Brain and Mala, Waller and the Suicide Squad stop in for a bit, along with the gang from the bar he stopped at after getting betrayed, an employee from the waste disposal plant he first met Brain in, and even Teen Deathstroke is there and seems to have moved in, though he's now calling himself Dance Stroke, fitting for his true passion in life. And for a cherry on top, the Demolition Team decides to crash the wrong party, as they've got quite the entourage waiting for them. So that was the plot of Peacemaker Tries Hard, and I gotta say, really solid. Kyle Starks is such an impressive writer and a really funny one at that. Going from his Wild Dog story to this just shows that he nails both the heartfelt moments and the comedic moments, all while feeling like total whiplash. Comedy is incredibly difficult to write in any medium, especially comics where your mind has to fill in a lot of the blanks. So going from Wild Dog, where the humor comes from this serious character reacting to the wacky hijinks that happen to him, to emulating James Gunn's humor is nothing short of impressive. Not every single joke lands, but that's to be expected of any comedy. It's incredibly subjective. That isn't to say he's just doing a pale imitation of the show, though. This still definitely reads like a Kyle Starks book through and through. One unique form of humor I love is playing with the medium itself, especially sound effects. Instead of the typical wham or thud, instead you get stuff like
ceiling fucked, burnt hair smell, workplace accident, zakaraboom, flawless victory.
Like I've alluded to a couple times now, your enjoyment of this comic will very much hinge on whether or not you like James Gunn's take on Peacemaker as a sort of lovable idiot who wants to be a superhero. If you're wanting a serious Peacemaker, you can check out his recent appearances in Suicide Squad in the Infinite Frontier era of DC, or his solo series from the 80s if you can find that. But what's more important than nailing the comedy is Starks also nails making the reader care about these characters no matter how bottom of the barrel. He got me to care about Red B's sacrifice, and that's a character from World War II who ended up falling into the public domain because no one bothered using him in any meaningful capacity. Meanwhile, he took the Demolition Team, a group of forgotten Green Lantern villains from the Bronze Age, and made them instantly endearing by adding the whole unionized angle to them. Most importantly, he gets you to care about Peacemaker himself. Even if you've never watched the show or the Suicide Squad movie, this comic will make you care about this version of Christopher Smith and his personal struggle completely by its own merits. And that personal struggle is such an overarching theme that it's even right there in the title. Peacemaker tries hard. His whole life, everyone from other kids to his own father constantly punching down on him his entire life, constantly told he'd never be worth anything. So as a result, he's so desperate to be seen as a legit superhero, so he can finally feel like his life is worth something. He takes any assignment Waller gives him to feel like he's making a difference. He invites any and all total strangers to his party just so he doesn't have to spend yet another birthday all alone because his dad never bothered to celebrate. And God, he even fully admits to being excited to work for Brain and Mala just for the prospect of feeling needed by the kind of people who'd steal dogs to further their goals. But Richard, the Red Bee, tells him the one thing he should have heard long before this adventure ever happened. Chris does try as hard as he can to be good enough, and he's been good enough this whole time. And it's with this newfound self-respect that he gives that same wisdom to Teen Deathstroke, or rather, Dancestroke, that doing what he loves is being good enough. And as long as he's happy doing that, that's all that matters. And by the end, they're surrounded by people who do genuinely care. Oh yeah, and Waller's there too. So yeah, if you guys couldn't tell, this comic is a blast. I'd recommend giving it a read if you want something fun and zany, and now is a great time to do so with Peacemaker Season 2 coming out in just a few months. And Mr. Starks, if you're by chance watching this, keep doing what you're doing and I'll gladly keep coming back to read it. That's all for today, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. This is Major Disaster signing off. Make sure to look away from your screen for at least 20 seconds to prevent having to eat an entire bucket of poop in the name of peace.